I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are on Treaty 1 and Dakota Nation's territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Neil Harden. I am chairing today's panel. Alongside me is Brent McIntyre in the room and Cynthia Stevens via Zoom. The city assessor today is David David Penner. All right, sorry. And recording secretary is Belhan Rojo. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment role in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by council and is independent of it in the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing, and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queensland.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, David.
Can the panel hear me?
Yes. No, come on over. Okay, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant.
Cindy, can you hear me?
Yes, David,
Brent,
we
can you hear me?
Yes.
Brent, can you hear me? Nod if you can.
He can't hear us.
Oh, he can't hear
He
us.
can't hear us, no.
Mr. McIntyre, can you hear me?
Not
We can hear you.
We can hear you, but you can't hear us.
I think these.
I can't hear you.
This is efficient. Technology.
All right, to recommence, I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, Treaty 1 of Dakota Nation's territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment role in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by council and is independent of it in the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis provided at this hearing and issues a written order that may be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to value or classification, or the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions the applicant may have, and the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they so wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each other item on the docket today. There is only one item today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and our board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You'll receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed or recorded, will be part of the public record. So can you do the swearing in now?
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
David Thomas George Penner.
And you affirm the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name,
Rob McLaughlin.
and you affirm the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Penner, you may proceed with your evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is file number 21-212. The roll number is 130529423300. The property address is 367 Ellis Avenue, and the owner is 4502523 Manitoba Limited. Value in the roll for 2022 is, as shown there, $853,000 at class code 20 or residential 2, and $3,413,000 as class code 60 or other property. The total being $4,266,000. These values are based on a reference date of April the 1st, 2018. The details of the property are shown there, and we are asking today that the value be confirmed at $4,266,000. As a preliminary matter, I'd like to point out that the agent's brief in almost its entirety contains post-reference material, and I would ask that the board disregard that evidence in its entirety.
Okay, could you bring that up once the applicant has started his presentation so that we can take a look at it, and then we'll discuss it at that time.
Okay, certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will continue. Turning to page 2 of my brief. An income approach summary appears on pages 6 and 7 of my report. I would like to note that the agent and the agent for the owner and the assessor have already agreed on the value for 2020 at $4,266,000. Reference date for the 2022 assessment is still April the 1st, 2018 by legislation. Therefore, the 15-1 agreement value is still binding for 2022. If you'll turn to page 8 of my brief, you'll see that Mr. McLaughlin and I came to an agreement and signed off on it on September the 6th of 2019, reducing the value as shown of $1,538,000 for class code 20 and $6,152,000 class code 60, and that was reduced by agreement to $853,000 class code 20 and $3,413,000 for class code 60. So the agent and myself have already agreed on the value based on the reference date, which is still in effect. So I believe this should be a simple matter of confirming the assessment. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Great. Do you have any questions?
I do not.
Grant, any questions of the assessor?
I have no questions.
Cynthia, any questions of the assessor?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, and I have no questions on that. First, we'll turn to the applicant, Dan. Can you address the agreement first of all?
You're asking about the agreement?
Yes.
Yes, the agreement, absolutely. In different times, we did agree to the assessment as based on the statements up to and including April 19th, 2018. Since then, there's been a physical change, in my opinion, and that needs to be addressed, and that's why I'm here.
Okay. All right, I guess we will have to hear your evidence on the physical change. On that, and we'll decide whether it's a physical change or not. this year's assessment, or the assessment under appeal, is based on April 1st, 2018 economic conditions. So if its economic condition is different than the physical condition of the present property.
Well, the physical condition changed the physical condition reduced the economic viability of the property, in my opinion. And it's not in my opinion, it's an absolute fact. And that's why we're here.
All right. I guess we'll proceed to hear your evidence and on the physical condition of your property. So go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't recognize my opening. As Mr. Penner has stated, we do have an agreement, and we're dealing with 367 Ellis Avenue, which is the Quest Inn on Ellis Avenue, Ellis and Carleton. Now, as far as my evidence goes, the province of Manitoba's own legislation requires a reassessment every 2 years. Well, because of health concerns, they pushed back the reassessment. So whatever has occurred after April 1st, 2020 is not going to be reflected now until the next reassessment. So the assessment is artificially high right now compared to the conditions that were forced upon the hotel for the last couple of years. Beginning of April of 2020, without debate or consultation, the Manitoba provincial government began implementing a series of forced business closures. Initially temporary, in many cases lead to permanent and small business closures. Commercially, the overall economic hardship has been immeasurable, devastating to small businesses in Manitoba. To date, the provincial government's shutdowns are as follows. And this is directly toward the hotel business. The first shutdown began in April of 2020 and it lasted until the end of June. The second shutdown, which limited the service of the hotel to rooms only. There was no more beverage, there was no more BLT, there was no more food service. And as a matter of fact, because of the shutdowns, nobody was traveling, so nobody was using the hotel. So everything is right down. The second shutdown occurred November of 2020 and ran right through until the end of January 2021. And the same thing applied. There was limited room service and no food, beverage, and BLT service was eliminated entirely. And then the third shutdown occurred May and to the end of June 2021, and the same result. These are forced physical shutdowns and not at the owner's discretion. The uncertain effect on hotel profitability, viability, and value cannot be underestimated. At page 2, the assessor is bound by the economic conditions prior to April 1st. I understand that. They may argue a loss in revenue due to the economy and the next reassessment will reflect the economic conditions. However, this was not the market or economy speaking in any way. This was the provincial government's reaction to a public health matter. I submit that this was a physical change. The government, with a threat of penalties and fines, physically closed the doors of the hotels and businesses. The assessor can and does make changes to assessments based on physical changes on a daily basis. For example, new construction, demolition, loss due to fire, business closures. This is no different. The doors were, if the doors were virtually physically locked by the government. Now, I'll point out that Section 13 of the Municipal Assessment Act does allow for changes due to physical conditions. Specifically, the year end July 2020. Now, I've included the statements, if you haven't seen it already, from 2017 right through to 2020. And yes, this is post-reference here, but how else do you address the debacle that is going on in the hotel industry and with this specific hotel? Now, let me take you to page 3 before I carry on. On page 3 is a spreadsheet, and it illustrates the gross sales of the hotel from 2017 all the way up to what's the year end? July of 2021. Now you'll see that in 17 there were 5.3 million, 18 5.7, 2019 for whatever reason 4.9, and then for I know why. Part of that was part of the shutdown, and then 4.3 in 2020. And then finally, in 2021, we're at $3.6 million. We have, now I will say that the federal government did provide wage subsidies to the hotel, and I've adjusted for that. So what I've done, the actual loss in revenue is about $1,459,000 over less than 2 years. That's gross sales of $1,459,000. All no fault of the economy, all no fault of the owner. This was government interference into the operation of this hotel and hotels in general. In order to determine what a value adjustment could be for this particular hotel, I've used it used to be a certificate agreement. I think it's 51, the agreement. I've used the agreement, and I've used 10% as NOI. So I've converted the $1,459,000 loss into a 10% net operating income. I've capitalized that at 11%, just like the agreement. 1 million, so that's a value of $1,326,000, and from that I deducted 15% for FF&E. That brings us to rounded $1,128,000 production I'm now requesting for year 2022.
So in terms of the CC20 and CC80, you're just prorating it on that?
Well, my recommendation does break it down. I think it's 20% and 80%.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is not the classical, it just happens to be the breakdown. So I'll go back to my first page. The year-end July 2020 statement shows a gross revenue loss of more than $1 million, or a loss of 22%. And the 2021 statement reflects like a gross revenue loss of more than 50%, or approximately $2.5 million. So over those 2 years, approximately, the hotel lost $2.5 million as gross sales. Well, pardon me, that's a loss of $3.5 million over 2 fiscal years, and the future is uncertain. Like, who's to know if moving forward there's going to be more shutdowns? And if there's more shutdowns, that means less NOI, that means less value. These things trade based on the net revenue that they produce. And now we're talking about risk. Was the cap rate 11%, or maybe now it's 15 or 20%? Because nobody knows what the future holds for hotels. Obviously, other small businesses were affected, but a hotel's value is uniquely based on net maintainable profitability. A 22% and a 50% loss of gross sales is devastating to the business and the market value with new restrictions and closures possible. The hotel industry may never be the same. I have provided supporting requests in revenue statements for 2017 to 21. And I've also identified that there's a federal subsidy of $477,000 in 20 and $1,086,000 in 21. And these are based on a percentage of the hotel revenue. And I've included that in my calculations and adjusted for that in my calculations. The method of this appeal to convert the exorbitant losses due to shutdown into a value is as follows. I averaged the 4-year gross revenue for the hotel, 2017 to 20. Includes 4 months of COVID closures, the subsidy. Established 4-year revenue average in 2020 wage subsidy, included 2021 subsidy. Okay, so I'm trying to explain myself badly that I've included the subsidy into the calculations and adjusted for that. So It's reduced the losses, but the losses still are $1,459,000. And again, I go on to explain the calculation, which is on page 3, and that is the gross revenue is the gross revenue loss is $1,459,000. And as I previously stated, from the 15-1 agreement, I used 10% as the NOI, capitalized at 11%. The bottom line is I'm asking for a reduction of $1,128,000. So the current assessment is, as Mr. Penner stated, class code 20 is $853,000, class code 80 is $3,413,000. I'm asking for a reduction to $627,000 for class code 20 and $2,510,400 for class code 60. That is my evidence, subject to any questions you may have.
Okay, Mr. Penner, now would be the time to make your objection as to post-reference material, if you so wish.
Yes, Mr. McLaughlin talks about a physical change to the property. However, the basis for his reduction request is all based on post-reference financial material, which are reflecting the economic impact of COVID and not a physical change to the property. So my objection is based on the reliance of post-reference financial statements.
Okay.
Let me address that.
You can address that, okay, the objection, yes?
I do understand what Mr. Penner is saying, and these are unusual circumstances, no doubt. However, the government, through force of penalties, physically nailed shut those doors. It's no different than having burned the place down. No longer do we have BLT revenue, food revenue, or beverage revenue, and reduced rooms. No fault of their own. All of a sudden, they've lost $2.5 million in revenue. Why? It was a unilateral decision. There was no debate. There was no nothing, but it affected the hotel's value and viability. How does a hotelier or a businessman recover $2.5 million? He doesn't. And now the city of Winnipeg is going to stand on their back as they lose this money. They need to reflect the uncertainty injected into the hotel market. Perhaps it'll be reflected in the next reassessment whenever that occurs. But right now, in the last 2 years, this hotel owner has lost $2.5 million. With some help from the government now, $1.5 million. The future is unknown and uncertain, and I don't think that the city of Winnipeg ought to be charging taxes based on a number that is not achievable in current market conditions. This is a physical change. There's no other way to address this. And like I said, the city of Winnipeg will be standing on this hotelier's back and not helping. A subtle reduction like this at least will indicate that the city is willing to work with hoteliers and not penalizing for the business there.
Okay. We understand the basis of your arguments. Are there any questions, Brent, of the applicant?
I have no questions.
Cynthia, any questions of the applicant?
No questions, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Penner, do you wish to summarize?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So the question is this a physical change to the property? And the short answer is no. Closing the doors or locking the doors is not a physical change to the property. Restaurants do it nightly. BLT lounges do it nightly. Businesses close their doors every night at the end of the day, or sometimes for extended periods. These are not physical changes to be considered in an assessment. Secondly, was any of the VLTs moved out or equipment moved out or partial part of the building demolished. No, none of this has happened. Those are physical changes. None of that has happened. These are economic changes that have impacted the hotel, and we understand that. Next, in terms of equity, we are not considering COVID in the assessments of any other hotel property in the city. We are bound by legislation by the reference date. We are not making changes for any other hotel property, and it would be unfair to make a change based on COVID for one and not all the others. And I repeat, we are not doing that. Lastly, and most importantly, the request for reduction is, in fact, based on post-reference financials, and these reflect the economic conditions impacting this hotel, specifically on COVID. We cannot consider post-reference material. We are bound by legislation. This panel is bound by legislation, as is the City of Winnipeg Assessment Department. We will reflect the impact of COVID in the next reassessment, which is 2023, and that will reflect April 1st, 2021 economic conditions. So the COVID impact will be shown in those assessments, but as I say, we are bound by legislation, and it is the government that extended the assessment period by a year, kept the reference date the same. We are bound by that legislation, and I would hope that the panel sees it that way as well. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Applicant, would you have a summary?
Mr. Penner goes on to speak of normal operations where every night they close, and of course the VLTs remain. And yeah, the VLTs remain, but they had no say in whether or not they closed. They closed. They were forced to close. This is not. This is unique. This is something we've never dealt with before. And the fact of the matter is, this hotel here lost $2.5 million because of this action of the government. As far as other hotels, well, they should have hired me, I guess. I don't know what I can tell you about that. I mean, they're bound by legislation, and I understand that. But this is an exceptional circumstance, and as such, it needs to be addressed in a unique manner. And this is beyond the hotelier's control. It was forced upon him, and he has to now deal with the fallout and live with the loss of revenue and the related loss in value for this, and with a very uncertain future ahead. And it could occur again. It could be next month to shut down everything again. So this is something that reflects the current circumstance of the property. As far as economic, well, that's the way to reflect the physical change. If this particular hotel, the beverage room burnt down and the VLTs were gone, they would, as of the date of the fire, remove that revenue and adjust the assessment. Well, we've had 3 fires this year, apparently, or the last year and a half, and metaphorical fires. And it could go on. So I think it's only fair. I think it's right, and I think it's a way to compensate the hotelier for negative circumstances beyond his control. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much for your presentations. We'll reserve judgment on you and get back as soon as we can. So that brings today's hearing to a close. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Mr. Steiner, I was looking forward to seeing you.
Right across the street.
Well, yeah, it's easy for you too.
Okay, you take care.
You too.
All right.
There we are.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.